Buckle up, Chargers fans, because things are getting real in their search for a head coach, and if they want to hire Jim Harbaugh, they could do so at any time.
You are Locked On Chargers, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Chargers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, and welcome into the Locked On Chargers podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Wade, joined as always by my co-host, David Drogemeyer, and we've been covering the Chargers together for 8 seasons now, but this is our 6th year as the host of the Locked On Chargers podcast, bringing you your team every day, or your potential head coach every day. Thank you guys, as always, to the everydayers for making us your first listen today, and to make sure you never miss the show, go subscribe or follow for free on the Locked On Chargers YouTube channel, and listen wherever you get your podcast from. David, what do we got today?
Well, Daniel, things could be happening very, very quickly with the Chargers head coaching job. They could go out there and hire Jim Harbaugh or whoever they want to be the next Chargers head coach at any time. But if they do miss out on Jim Harbaugh, they absolutely have to have solid contingency plans in place.
And it seems like they do, right? It seems like the Chargers are approaching this search the right way. And if things don't work out with Jim Harbaugh, you have to be able to move quickly if you want to get the best options after him. And it seems like they're doing that with Mike Vrabel interviewing today on Thursday, and also Ben Johnson coming up this weekend. But today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use the code all lowercase LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. David, there's been a lot of speculation, there's been a lot of smoke, but going into Thursday, there was no way the Chargers could just up and hire Jim Harbaugh. It wasn't possible, right? Because they had to satisfy the Rooney Rule, which they did on Thursday by interviewing David Shaw to be their next head coach. And I don't believe the Chargers actually wanted David Shaw to be their next head coach, but it doesn't mean they didn't want him in some capacity. And I think he actually could stick around with the Chargers, especially if they hire Jim Harbaugh. But that part is out of the way now. With the interview of Leslie Frazier, with the interview of David Shaw, the Chargers are now free to hire their head coach at any time now. And both of those super accomplished coaches that could be getting interviews on their own merit. But since they weren't with teams, they allowed for the Chargers to go through that loophole, right? Which is what it is. The Raiders did the same thing as well. But now we have to buckle up, because now the reports can get a lot crazier, because it could happen at any time. The Chargers still do have a lot of interview requests out there, David, but keep the notifications on, because this Jim Harbaugh hiring, or whoever it ends up being, could happen at any moment.
It definitely can, and I hope that we get it. I hope we get it very, very soon. I'm tired of waiting. It's been an exhaustive search, to the Chargers' credit. I feel like that is definitely something that you need to give them credit for. They've interviewed over 10 head coaches right now, and even have a couple more that are still on the docket with Dan Quinn and Ben Johnson. And they also requested Raheem Morris and Aaron Glenn as well. So they have really went all over the place, talked to as many people as humanly possible. But now the runway is clear. If the option is Jim Harbaugh, then now the Chargers can go down that runway and they can take off and they can get that deal done.
Yeah, and the thing that before Thursday, right, was they had to interview 2 minority head coaching candidates in person, which is a great rule in theory, right? The way that teams are going around it feels gross and dirty, right? Because it feels like they're trying to go through loopholes. But that's what they had to do before they could officially hire a head coach. So today, with the David Shaw knowledge and obviously Leslie Frazier last weekend in person, the Chargers have satisfied that. But the David Shaw one is interesting, right? Because he has a lot of connections to Jim Harbaugh. He was with Jim Harbaugh for 4 seasons at Stanford. He ended up taking the job of head coach at Stanford after Jim Harbaugh left for the 49ers. And this is a guy that has a lot of experience, not just running an offense, but also as a quarterback's coach as well. And I think, David, he could potentially fit in either of those capacities on Jim Harbaugh's staff if that is the way they end up going.
And the thing is Jim Harbaugh and David Shaw go even further back than that. He was with him at the University of San Diego as a wide receivers coach back in 2006, a passing game coordinator and a wide receivers coach. So this has been a long-standing relationship, a long-standing friendship between these two. And, you know, one of the things that's also part of all of these interviews is a fact-finding mission. You know, you're trying to learn more about these individuals, learn about their ideologies, learn about how they see the game, learn about how they've been successful, how their organizations they've been affiliated with have been successful.
And also, in this case, how he feels about Jim Harbaugh, right? Because if you're trying to get some inside info of what it's like to coach with Jim Harbaugh, David Shaw would be one of the first people you would go talk to.
And he would know him intimately. He would know him extremely well because he's worked with him many times, throughout the past, history of them working together. So there's a lot of that. And yeah, it might not be for the head coaching position, but it very well could be for an offensive coordinator position. I mean, that is something that he's done in the past for Jim Harbaugh. So It is something that could be a very strong likelihood to happen again at the NFL level.
Yeah, and the thing is about David Shaw is David Shaw has been a really, really hot name in head coaching cycles before at the NFL level because of the work that he did at Stanford, right?
The 96-54 record. I mean,
exactly. I mean, he's the really winningest coach in Stanford history. He helped groom Andrew Luck from 2009 to 2011. He has quarterback coach experience with the Raiders and the Ravens at the NFL level. He's a super accomplished coach that has been considered for NFL head coaching gigs before. But for this regime right now and how things are moving, it feels more likely he would be part of a staff for Jim Harbaugh, which is also another way. I mean, even Leslie Frazier, right? Hey, does he want to maybe coach some defense? If it's not, and it doesn't end up being someone like Jesse Minter as a defensive coordinator from Michigan, everything's on the table. But there is a lot more reasons for the Chargers to have these interviews other than just potentially, hey, we're going to hire you to be our head coach.
Right.
This is the thing, is right now, it can happen at any time, which is, I think, even more of a reason to make sure you be careful which reports you're believing. Because, my God, scrolling through Chargers Twitter is just siren after siren and breaking news after breaking news of everyone saying Chargers, Jim Harbaugh, confirmed. But so many of them have already gone awry. Like, there's been so many people who've already said, hey, Jim Harbaugh is going to be hired within the next few hours. Jim Harbaugh is going to be hired tomorrow, even when we knew that would be impossible because they hadn't satisfied the Rooney Rule at that point, right? But one good thing that kind of came out of it is you ended up quote tweeting someone named Timothy Bailey from CFB Dogs, who's been saying, Jim Harbaugh to the Chargers for a while now. But he said, I expect Jim Harbaugh to the Chargers news is going to break as soon as the next few hours and as late as over the next week, which you retweeted and said, like, well, that's a pretty wide margin. Can we get it narrowed down to, a day or a span of a couple days? But what did come out of that, David, was Benjamin Albright, who I actually do value his reports and is a very, very notable NFL name and is very well connected, saying basically that he expects it to happen and that the salary is kind of already in place as well.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen a bunch of different reports, but according to Benjamin Albright, it's going to be probably in the neighborhood of $18 million per season. I mean, anywhere from 15 to 18. I mean,
good.
There's a lot of different reports out there, which I don't care. That's fine with me. That number sounds great. It sounds wonderful because that just shows me that, if it does happen, if it actually does come to fruition, then all of the talk of there not being a limit on what they're going to spend on a head coach was actually truth. And I think that's one of the things we've struggled with the Chargers organization a lot in the past is
believing them,
saying one thing and then doing another. Right. So at least in this situation, if this does come to fruition, this will do a lot of great work in mending the fences and repairing the image and establishing a better relationship and really inciting some excitement back into this organization, back behind being a Charger fan. I think there's going to be a lot of pride that gets restored if they're able to make this move happen.
Yeah, and we only talk about this because, yes, there is some legitimate reporting out there. There's some legitimate reporters who have already gotten this wrong, but you just have to be careful who you're trusting these times because things have been going crazy, and it's been a total tornado on Chargers Twitter of reports and fake reports and people just guessing. So you got to make sure you stay with this trusted sources. If you see something from me and David that we're retweeting, chances are it's going to be from someone that we actually trust fully, and we wouldn't be retweeting if we weren't, right? But the other thing that Benjamin Albright talked about was that potentially Jim Harbaugh and Ed Dodds are a package deal, and we know the Chargers just got done interviewing Ed Dodds for their GM position right now. Someone that we've talked about before is a guy that we would like to see in that position as well. So that package could all be coming together, and now it literally could happen at any time. I do think, though, the Chargers will go through with the next few interviews that they have scheduled to keep that fact-finding mission going. And I think, David, it's so smart for them to be not only just interviewing some of the best coaches and best offensive minds around the league, but having that contingency plan ready. Because if Jim Harbaugh does decide to be a wild card, like he has before, you need to be ready and ready to move quickly. So we're going to talk about that coming up right after this. First, though, I do need to tell you guys about eBay Motors because passion, drive, and patience, what brings home the winning trophy is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance from superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for, and with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need and the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. So keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit. Only available to U.S. customers. I also need to tell you guys about FanDuel, the only place to place your bets. In the NFL regular season is over, but there's still time to get on the action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That means once you place that $5 bet, you cannot lose. You're coming away with $150 in bonus bets no matter what, and they always have so many great promotions going on, live same-game parlays, the Parlay Hub, which helps you build your own parlay. But right now, you can also get in on the Kick of Destiny 2 with Rob Gronkowski looking for redemption after missing a 25-yard field goal last year during the Super Bowl. You can place basically a free bet. You get a free guess on whether he is going to make it or not. If you get it right, you get your share of $10 million. So make sure you guys go to FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet a layup. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. All right, David. Well, we talked about, that the Chargers can now do whatever they want to do. There's nothing stopping them from hiring their next head coach. I mean, it could happen in 10 minutes. It could happen next week. But they do have some very important interviews coming up. And they also did a very important interview on Thursday because they interviewed Mike Vrabel, who to me is one of the top options not named Jim Harbaugh. But what I've kind of taken from this process overall is that I'm glad the Chargers are going about it the way that they are, because they said they were going to cast a wide net. And even though we kind of didn't believe them because we always kind of felt like Jim Harbaugh was their guy and in a perfect world, they were a match made in heaven. But that didn't stop them, right? Like the Raiders have barely interviewed anyone, right? They're probably going to go with Antonio Pierce and Champ Kelly, and we're going to talk about that because some of the other Jim Harbaugh suitors are falling off like flies, right?
Quickly,
which is always great for the Chargers. So we're going to talk about that. But with this process, they've been handling it well, and we weren't necessarily sure that they would, and they don't necessarily have a track record of doing it well. But David, like I said before, Jim Harbaugh is a wild card, right? This is the most confident through this process. I've only gotten more and more confident that Jim Harbaugh to the Chargers is going to happen, and I think it's going to be a franchise-altering, game-changing type of moment, and I can't wait for it to happen. But Jim Harbaugh is a total wild card, and everything is still technically on the table. Until he signs that dotted line, it's all up in the air, right? But I'm so glad the Chargers have their contingency plans in place. And I don't think that the timing of these interviews is coincidental, right? I think you're seeing them right before the chances, January 22nd, when everyone has a chance to interview people in person and things are really going to start to heat up, that you have them interviewing Mike Vrabel for his first interview with any team that we know of so far. Yep. And also Ben Johnson on Saturday, who we're going to talk about. But David, it's so smart to have these contingency plans in place, because if Jim Harbaugh does say, hey, I am going back to Michigan. Sorry, I know I'm a weirdo, but I'm dipping, The Chargers can move quickly. And with, the David Shaw interview, with the Leslie Frazier interview, with what they've done and how they've handled things, they've given themselves a chance to, okay, well, hey, if we don't get Jim Harbaugh, we're right here and we're ready to pounce on one of these other options.
Yeah, the Chargers definitely do not want to be the bride that's right up there getting ready to go get married and then have the groom run off and go, go be with his Sancha. And leave. go be with his sneaky link, as the young kids say. But they have some real, actual legitimate options, guys that they have either spoke to or are going to speak to that have a straight up, very reputable, very important background, like Mike Vrabel, who's done an exceptional job as a head coach, who brings a lot of things to the table that the Chargers would need. And then, a couple of other guys that I feel like if you, brought them in, that you'd feel comfortable with what they're going to do and how they are going to help your team.
And the thing is there's still valuable insight to be gained from these coaches, even if the Chargers still end up going with Jim Harbaugh, right? Like,
absolutely.
If you're a smart team, you gather as much information as possible. You ask Mike Vrabel, how would you fix the defense? You ask Ben Johnson, how would you maximize Justin Herbert? You take all of this in, and you also get the dirt on the teams that they're from, right? Because you have potential candidate, opponents on your schedule next year. This is such a good exercise to be able to find out so much of this information. These interviews, this time you get with these guys is priceless because you don't always have these openings. They come along every few years.
Knowledge is power, Daniel.
If you play it right, you can get a ton out of it.
Yeah.
And with Mike Vrabel interviewing with the Chargers on Thursday, like I said, right, I think this is the first interview he's done with any team so far that I've seen, right?
I believe that as well.
And with Mike Vrabel, he is an excellent backup candidate, a proven winner, one with Ryan Tannehill and Marcus Mariota. His teams definitely have an identity, and we've wanted the Chargers to have an identity, right? A level of toughness, a level of physicality, a level of you don't want to play us because when you play us, it's going to be a bar fight.
Yeah,
right?
We're going to kick you in the teeth.
Totally. Yeah. And a guy who's proven, right? 54 and 45, has hired good offensive coordinators like Matt LaFleur and Arthur Smith, who were both very good coordinators, right?
Yeah.
Has been number one seed in the AFC, has made it to an AFC championship game. So Mike Vrabel, David, hey, if Jim Harbaugh doesn't work out, he's kind of Jim Harbaugh light, right there.
Yeah, I mean, I really like the idea of Mike Vrabel. I mean, he's definitely in my top 2 to 3 candidates. I mean, this is a guy who brings physicality, he brings toughness, he brings that relatability, being a former player, not only just being a former player, but he's a 3-time Super Bowl champion as a player. Yeah. So he's been there, done that, and won at the highest level as a player, and then he can really relate to the players on the field because he's been there and done that. So I think that's extremely important. He's always kept his team very well prepared. It seems like they are never going into a contest not knowing what's going on or looking like they're embarrassed or completely blown out. I don't really remember seeing many of those type of games. They're always extremely close. We know he's a leader of men. He's a former coach of the year. He had the number 1 seed in the AFC twice. I mean, this is a guy that made Ryan Tannehill look like a serviceable quarterback. So
better than that even for sure.
Like actual good quarterback. So this is a guy who brings a lot to the table, and I definitely would not be mad if Jim Harbaugh did what he does, and he's a little bit unpredictable and he doesn't join the Chargers. That if that's the case, then Mike Vrabel I think would be a great contingency plan for that.
Yeah, and the nice thing is they're basically interviewing the 2 guys we would want most if they don't go with Harbaugh, because they also have Ben Johnson scheduled to interview on Saturday. And I wouldn't be surprised, Ben Johnson a little bit more than Mike Vrabel, but I wouldn't be surprised if these guys are going to wait to see if the Chargers do go with Jim Harbaugh before they take a spot with a less favorable quarterback that doesn't have potentially a top 5 pick and especially a top 5 quarterback on the same roster, right? And with Ben Johnson, you get a chance to pick one of the best offensive minds in the NFL right now and ask him, like I said, how would you maximize Justin Herbert? He's the best offensive coordinator and best offensive schemer in this cycle. He is a very legitimate backup plan because with what he's done with Jared Goff, I think you can fantasize over, hey, what would this guy be able to do with Justin Herbert? And now when you interview him on Saturday, you'll have a chance to kind of put that homework in, put that groundwork in to where if it doesn't work out with Jim Harbaugh, Ben Johnson would be an incredible backup plan, even if he does come with the red flags of not having the head coaching experience.
Right, but at least this is a guy that you're bringing in to maximize your number 1 asset, and that is your quarterback, Justin Herbert. A guy that brings balance, that has a top 5 rushing attack, top 5 passing attack, was part of the team that assembled a fantastically physical offensive line and just one of the best offensive lines in the NFL. Imagine what Justin Herbert could have done behind that Lions offensive line.
Yeah.
He would have torn this league to shreds. So having that balance, having that guy who you can marry with Justin Herbert and not have to worry about him getting stolen away as a coordinator, I think would bring some peace, bring some stability, and I think would be a really, really good business relationship for those two, for Justin Herbert really entering in the prime of his career.
And the thing I love about Ben Johnson is you look at that offense and you look at it and say, I feel like they are absolutely maximizing every ounce of talent that this offense has.
No doubt.
They are using everyone the exact way, or close to the way that they should given their skill set. And that's what you want so much. The nice thing about Ben Johnson as well, you don't have to parse what his responsibility for. This is his offense, right? This isn't Eric Bieniemy standing next to Andy Reid where you don't know. right? This is not a guy that works for an offensive play caller, so you don't know, okay, well, how much is him and how much is Dan Campbell, right? Dan Campbell's not calling the plays, right? You know exactly how much credit to give to Ben Johnson because he's that guy. So I think unlike, when you like with some guys, like with Matt LaFleur, before he went to the Packers, he left LA to get away from Sean McVay so he could go stand next to Mike Vrabel because no one was going to give Mike Vrabel the credit for the offense because they know that Matt LaFleur was running the offense, right? That's what you get with Ben Johnson. Mike McCoy was the guy standing next to Peyton Manning. Ben Johnson's the guy standing next to Jared Goff, making him look like an elite quarterback. To me, that's what sells me on him because I know that offense looks the way it does because it was Anthony Lynn running it 2.5 years ago, and as soon as Ben Johnson took over, it looked like a completely different unit, and it's one of the best schematic units in the league. He's one of the best play designers out there. Matching him with Justin Herbert, you could do a whole lot worse. But we do have more to get into because it is still Jim Harbaugh number one. It is still Jim Harbaugh, big space, everybody else for me. And it looks like it's going to happen, especially, David, because some of the other teams we thought might get in the race are falling quickly. So we're going to talk about that coming up right after this. First, though, I do need to tell you guys about Prize Picks, which is daily fantasy made easy. With Prize Picks, all you have to do is select 2 or more players, pick more or less on their projected stats, and place your entry. The more entries you hit on, the more you win. And if you hit on 6 of those entries, you can win 25 times your money. PrizePicks also offers great promotions all the time. One of my favorites is Taco Tuesday. Each Tuesday, PrizePicks discounts select player projections up to 25% to provide you even more value. That means if, Keenan Allen needed 100 yards for you to win, now he only needs more than or less than 75 yards. And that's what's great about PrizePicks. They also offer their reboot policy for injured players, and they're the only place that does that for fantasy. And also for this weekend slate of games, you can go with Lamar Jackson throwing for more than or less than 226.5 passing yards and pair that with Jahmyr Gibbs rushing for more or less than 45.5 yards. That's how simple it is. So go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use the code LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. That's prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL, promo code LockedOnNFL. You put $100 in, they will match it. PrizePicks, daily fantasy sports, made easy. All right, David, let's get into other things that are kind of pointing the Chargers in the direction of, okay, hey, Jim Harbaugh might be happening. Because the thing is one of the reasons you feel so good about it is because there doesn't seem to be a lot of competition for his services. Like, depending on who you're trusting, it feels like Michigan feels like it's a foregone conclusion that he's leaving. And there's not a lot of NFL teams. I mean, there's only one NFL team that's hired him, the Falcons, right? And what are the Falcons doing? That's interviewed him. And what are the Falcons doing? Bringing in Bill Belichick for a second interview. So it looks like they're going in a different direction. But I do want to tell you guys first that Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. They are bringing you coverage 24/7 the way that only the local experts of Locked On can. So make sure you go subscribe to Locked On Sports today, the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. David, we got the news this week that the Falcons are trying to get Bill Belichick in for a second interview. That's music to my ears, right?
Yes.
If Jim Harbaugh was going to the Falcons for a second interview, even if that happens, I'm going to feel uneasy. I'm going to get a tummy ache, right? Like, I'm going to feel like everything is going bad.
Especially if it's before the Chargers.
I'm going to spiral. Well, yeah, I mean, first of all, if Jim Harbaugh gets a second interview with the Chargers and they don't have Sean Merriman blocking the door, we're going to have issues, right? Because there's nothing standing in the way this
Sean,
time.
you've been a guest of the show. You got to do us a solid on this one.
And he wants to,
it.
right?
Just do it.
But when I see that, David, I instantly look at it in Chargers terms and say, this is good news for the Chargers.
Absolutely, yes. I mean, first of all, the first meeting with Bill Belichick was with Arthur Blank, the Falcons owner, one-on-one. And so, obviously, that
in virtual
meeting went well. And,
oh, wait, no, it wouldn't have been virtual because he was fired. So,
it was in person.
He's allowed to go.
Yeah. And then this second interview, apparently, according to Ian Rappaport on NFL Total Access, is going to be with the owner and, more members of the front office, like brass.
More official. Yeah.
Right. So that seems like that's going towards, marriage for them. That seems like that's where Bill Belichick is going to be coaching probably for the last time in his, Hall of Fame illustrious
Fingers crossed
career.
Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed. Obviously, nothing's done yet. That still has to go well, but it's trending towards the right direction for us.
Please go.
And that is a beautiful thing.
And the reason I say it like that is because, it's a double whammy for me because, hey, if he does turn it around, cool. Keep him in the NFC.
Absolutely.
Full circle, 28-3. Now he's their coach. It's all weird. But it also keeps him away from Justin Herbert, which I know that wasn't a popular take amongst a lot of you. because a lot of you still like Bill, I think mostly because of the name brand value. But offensively, I'm trying to keep that man away from Justin Herbert. I'm trying to keep Matt Patricia away from Justin Herbert. I'm trying to keep Josh McDaniels, all of those guys away from Justin Herbert, right? So this is a double-edged sword, but in a good way, where it's like, okay, stay out of the AFC in case you do turn it around. Stay away from Justin Herbert. Go be the Falcons head coach. That's great. That's the only other team that Jim Harbaugh has interviewed with at this point. It looks like they're going a different direction. It looks like it, right? The only other team that I've seen out there that Jim Harbaugh has been interested in is the Raiders, right?
Yeah.
The Raiders seem like they're also going in another direction. I mean, this is one that's not totally confirmed yet. I mean, Jim Harbaugh hasn't met with the Raiders at all, so that's obviously good news. But with Max Crosby, saying that, hey, I'm going to request a trade potentially if you don't go with Antonio Pierce, the interim head coach.
Devontae Adams also giving his support.
Devontae Adams. I mean, their whole locker room. The players want Antonio Pierce, right? Yeah. And they want Champ Kelly potentially. And it's looking like they're closing in on general manager Champ Kelly, who's their interim, who has also been sitting in on meetings they've had with other head coaches. So not only does that mean that they're probably going to go with him, but it probably means they're not going to get Ed Dodds, which is great news for the Chargers. And they're probably... Yeah, so like if they go Champ Kelly and Antonio Pierce, that means they're not going with Jim Harbaugh and Ed Dodds, and that's good news.
Yeah, and I mean, there's been a lot of reports out there that seem to indicate that is probably going to be the tandem that is going to be in place in Las Vegas. This is from Adam Schefter. Interim coach Antonio Pierce has emerged as the leading candidate to become the full-time head coach in Las Vegas with the support of key players there, per league sources. There will be other options for Raiders owner Mark Davis to consider, but as one source said, and I quote, "I would be blown away if Antonio weren't the pick." That is music to my ears because I definitely don't want Jim Harbaugh to be over there with the Raiders. If it's Antonio Pierce, seems like that's working out for the players, and that would work out for me.
Like I said, they're the only team that has actually reportedly had interest from Jim Harbaugh, right? They had interest in Jim Harbaugh, and they had interest from Jim Harbaugh. And I'll believe Mark Davis's haircut and him not trying to go after Jim Harbaugh once that dotted line is signed. So as soon as that can happen with Antonio Pierce, the better, because it's one more team that's falling off, one more team that's not competition for the Chargers and getting the guy that we all want, right? And that's what the point is here. And I think another good thing that happened for them in those regards is that the Cowboys are reportedly, for some reason, keeping Mike McCarthy after a disastrous playoff loss, right? And this is big because you don't want Jerry Jones and that oil money getting in on this sweepstakes. Not that I think he would have, because I think he loves yes men, but if the Eagles had decided to move on from Nick Sirianni, which it doesn't seem like they're going to do because he's shopping for coordinators, supposedly, right, reportedly. If those two teams, those two historic franchises got in a bidding war, that's not good news for the Chargers. The other part of it is both of those teams have really, really good rosters. Like both of those teams have playoff-ready rosters, playoff-tested rosters in a lot of cases, right? So like for those two teams who have quarterbacks, who have weapons on both sides, in two historic franchises that I think a lot of coaches would want to take over, that is good news for the Chargers that those teams are staying out, reportedly, of the Jim Harbaugh sweepstakes.
I mean, yeah. I mean, those two teams look like they're ready to win. Like they're ready to win championships. They have fantastic rosters, both on offense and on defense. Like they have a killer team. So if they became available, I mean, of course, why wouldn't Jim Harbaugh be interested in those opportunities? So thankfully, that does not seem like it's going to be the case. Yeah. And that's all for the better.
Exactly, and it's just that's why we're talking about this, right? Like Jim Harbaugh interviewed with the Falcons. Now they're getting a second interview with Bill Belichick. Perfect. Do that. I love that. Raiders had interest. He had interest. They're probably going with Antonio Pierce. Cowboys and Eagles likely off the table after both of those coaches were on the hot seat, and it looked like both of those dudes were going to get fired, even though Nick Sirianni was in a Super Bowl last year, because that's the expectations they have in Philadelphia, right?
Oh, yeah.
Mike McCarthy's winning 12 games a year, but losing like that in the first round, those are the expectations of those teams who won't take any less than that, right? So I thought both those dudes could be gone. The fact that they're not is great news for the Chargers, because what it means is the breadcrumbs are all leading the same place. Everything is pointing towards the Chargers landing Jim Harbaugh and changing their franchise forever, potentially, right? Like their best chance at getting a Super Bowl right now, in my eyes, comes with Jim Harbaugh. I didn't necessarily feel that way about Brandon Staley. Didn't necessarily feel that way about Anthony Lynn or Mike McCoy or Norv Turner. I haven't felt that way since Marty Schottenheimer, where I felt like he had a chance to get him there. That's what it feels like. And the crazy thing is the next time you hear from us, it could be the big one. We could be talking about the Chargers getting it done and hiring Jim Harbaugh, and that's exciting. And you have to tamp it down, but as we're telling you, things are going in the right direction, and it could happen any moment. So make sure your notifications are on, because I promise you, when that bomb drops, you are not going to want to miss this show. So go subscribe or follow for free on the Locked On Chargers YouTube channel. Listen wherever you get your podcast from. Do both, so you really make sure you don't do it. And also make sure you're following us on all social media. You can find me on Twitter at Dan Talk Sports, David Druckmeyer at DroTalkSD, and the show's page at Locked On LAC. We'll be going nuts there if it happens. You can also find us on Instagram at Locked On Chargers and our Locked On Chargers Facebook page. So make sure you guys are back here the next time we're talking, whether it's Monday, it could be Saturday, it could be Sunday. Whenever it happens, make sure you come here, because you know we're going to be freaking out about it. And it feels like, guys, it feels like it's happening. And the Chargers have let us down so many times, but man, what is that moment going to feel like? What
Euphoria.
is it going to feel like when he signs on that dotted line potentially? I can't wait for it. And I'm so excited for you guys, because honestly, you deserve it. So make sure you guys are here with us next time, because it is your team every day. But until then, guys, take it easy and go Bolts.